This special software showcase features a final demo from our April 2025 hackathon. Let's take a look.
What I worked on was on tackling a problem that um, Marv and Larry have expressed to me in the past. So we often run into this case where there's sort of a race condition between the translation team. Once they have finished a draft of a translation and handed it off to the publication team, um, the translation team may continue doing refinement on that, fixing typos or things like that, at the same time that the publication team is making changes to the repo that are similar to what Marvin Pettia were just showing us, providing structure, moving things around so that they look nice, indenting poetry and things like that. These changes, the data is structured very differently. For the translation team, they're BTT writer repos, which are just physically very different than the consolidated repos that the publishing team works on. And so it's very hard to relay updates back and forth. If Marv and Larry make changes to the structure, they don't really have a good way of getting it to a place where the team can interact with it and make changes. Likewise, when the translation team makes content changes, it's very painful for Marv and Larry to incorporate those changes in it. So I was going to spend a minute or two kind of delving into that a little bit so you can kind of understand the problem we're trying to solve. So the translation team is working in BTT writer repos, which are constructed more or less like this. And this is as deep as we're going to go. So in a BTT writer repo, there are subfolders for each each chapter in that book. A BTT writer repo is one book per project. And the text is broken up into many small files. Each file represents a chunk, which is to say one or more verses of scripture. The reason that it's formatted this way is because that is a very convenient way for the BTT writer tool to work. The way it interacts with the user, this is a convenient way for it to store its files and be able to work quickly and efficiently. BTT writer cares about the structure of scripture as far as it's concerned with chapters and verses, but doesn't care at all about formatting. It doesn't care about paragraph markers or quotation markers or indent or anything like that. The main thing it cares about is where are the chapters and verses, and in the Android version, where are the footnotes. On the other hand, the publication team is working with a publication repo, which is they're working with Python scripts and other tools. They're not working with BTT writer at all. They have the whole Bible in one project, and they work in a single repo with one file per book. So those files can contain hundreds of USFM markers that are used to structure and format scripture. As I mentioned, putting in poetry and quotations and things like that. So to illustrate sort of the difference between them, you can see that here in this little diff over on the left, you can see what the BTT writer output looks like. You can see it's grouped in chunks. And over on the right, you can see that the USFM that the publication team works with is very different. It has a lot more markers in it. You can see they've made changes to spacing and commas and things like that. So the formats are different. And the publication team adds a lot of structure that's necessary for making those beautiful Bibles that Pettia and Marv just showed us, but the translators don't need to know or care about at all. The translation team, when they're doing work, they might do things like adding words or maybe deleting repeated sections of scripture or maybe changing one word for another. So here you can kind of see the kinds of changes the translation team can make. And that leads to what we call in the development world merge conflicts. Yeah. So in the case where both the publication team has made changes to the text and translators have made changes to the text, we've got a problem. These merges aren't trivial to solve, and it's not a solved problem, for example, to have Git try and unsort these. It can do pretty well with things like fixing headers and footers, but anytime a line has been changed by both sides, it's going to throw its hands up in the air and say a human needs to fix this. And similarly, when the the content team is adding things like poetry and quotation markers. Those go right in the middle of verses. And it's not, certainly to some automated program that we would write, it's not obvious how to identify changes on one side of the quotation mark versus change on the other side of the quotation mark. It's not a trivial problem. And so we have this kind of back and forth relationship between the BCT writer repos and the consolidated USFM repo that the publication team uses. And those right now are generally just manual. There's not much of a process in place. Ruben's been working on a way to automate the consolidation side of it, that first arrow there, where we take a bunch of BTT writer repos and squash them together into a single consolidated repo. But there's still the problem of syntax updates where the changes that Marv and Larry make, there's no process in place right now to push those changes back to the repos so that the translation team can make use of them. And likewise, there's no process in place to capture content changes from the BTT writer repos and put them in the consolidated repo. So this is essentially the problem. I just kind of want to make it clear what we're trying to address. So right now, when the the other thing I wanted to say here is the part that I decided to focus on for this hackathon is that red arrow at the bottom. So I didn't, because those are both things that need to happen. But the content updates seem to be more interesting from the BTT writer repos to the consolidated repo than the other way around. So currently, when those things happen, the publication team has to manually review the changes and copy just the things they think are correct, or else we just take what's from the translation team and redo their changes work on top of it. And because each change is really, a human has to look at it and figure out, oh, is this what we want or not? It's hard to write a program to automate that. But what I was thinking, the question I was asking for this hackathon was, large language models, I mean, the embedded logic of language, that's kind of what they do. So maybe a large language model can help us with this task. So that's what I decided to look at. So there's a few approaches. One approach that Ruben suggested was to maybe look at the process itself to make changes less painful. Could we focus maybe on doing the content changes first, having the translation teams work those, and then we do syntax as a second step. I thought that's a good idea. It's something we should look at. Then there's the updating the BTT writer repos with publication changes, and then pulling these back. So my experiment with this, I wanted to start with a consolidated repo that has some sophisticated USFM markers in it. So Marv was kind enough to provide me with a couple of those. And so then, because for this experiment, I'm not worrying about the consolidated repo back to the BTT writer repos. I just created one that has the same content as the consolidated repo. So it has the same content, but it doesn't have any of the sophisticated markers. It's just chapters and verses and stuff. Actually, just verses. So then I modified the BTT writer repo with some additions, deletions, and changes. And then I asked ChatGPT, hey, take Marv's repo, the consolidated repo. Good to see you. Have a safe trip.
Yeah,
Bye. Ay con Dios.
blessings. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bon voyage. So I presented, the idea was to present that to ChatGPT and say, hey, do it for us. Figure out what changed in the BTT writer repo and bring it over to Marv's repo, the consolidated repo, and see how it goes. So it turns out, much like Marv was expressing, there's definitely a wrestling act with ChatGPT to understand what I want it to do. So this is just an example of what the consolidated repo looked like and what the BTT writer repo looked like. So the changes that I made to the BTT writer repo, I made an addition for my first test. I made an addition, and I made a deletion, and I made a change. So I wanted to kind of start with three very basic changes to see, can it pick those up? And then it was wrestling time. It was a challenge to get ChatGPT to do what I wanted, and part of it was because I had to understand the problem myself before I could get ChatGPT to do it. So as I was sort of like saying, well, here's what I have and here's what I have figured out, it would do things like give me the same output as the input, or it would say, oh, please upload the files you're talking about. And I'm like, they're already here.
There.
Exactly. And so forth. So I had to think really carefully and say, okay, if I were going to ask a human to do this, what would I give them? I was like, okay, well, I would explain the problem to them, and then I would give them this is what the consolidated repo looks like. Here's what the BTT writer repo looks like. Here are the changes. Like here's the version of it that has the changes in it, and then please kind of go back to the first one. So that took some experimentation to sort of figure out how to teach ChatGPT what I wanted to do. It was surprisingly like regular software development, except like underwater with my hands tied behind my back. So my prompt eventually ended up looking like this. So I said, dear ChatGPT, here's the following original text. So this is the one from the consolidated repo. And then I explained to ChatGPT, it was converted to this simpler format for users to edit. So that's the BTT writer text without any of the user's changes in it. Then I explained this simpler format was then updated by the users. And then I provided it the updated text. And then I said, please update the original text to incorporate the changes to the updated simpler text while maintaining the structure of the original. And it did it.
Wow.
So this diff here on the left side is Marv's original repo, and on the right side is ChatGPT incorporating the changes from the BTT writer repo into it. And this is correct. So you can see in the top chunk there's the word we added. In the middle chunk, there was the phrase we removed. In the bottom chunk, there was the word that we changed. I was astonished. I was like, oh my goodness, it actually worked. So that was really cool. So I think what I concluded is that it's capable of detecting differences between the modified translation and consolidated repo, at least simple ones like the ones I threw at, additions, deletions, and changes. And it was able to import the changes without disturbing the publication markers. And that was the key. That was the main thing that we wanted it to do. So I think I can conclude it is possible. Like it's at least there's more path to go down. This wasn't a dead end. So that was really exciting.
That's good.
And then I ran out of time. And so, so here's what I see maybe going forward if we decide to pursue this faster. I'd like to run some experiments that have more convoluted syntax. I want poetry markers. I want quote markers. That's why I was asking you for some more sophisticated repos. I'd like to try with larger sections of text. I want to do an entire chapter. I want to try an entire book. You know, let's see if we can fill ChatGPT's context window. And then if those things seem like they are working, then I would want to actually go ahead and let's try this with a real repo, a real consolidated, or a copy of a real consolidated repo, a real BTT writer repo. Can we shuttle those back and forth? That third bullet point is mostly just work. Like it's not so much can we do it. It's just I didn't want to spend time doing that if this wasn't gonna work.
If you weren't going to get it, so.
Yeah. I think that's my last slide. That's everything.
So amazing presentation, start to finish there.
Thanks.
One thing I was thinking about, every time we use AI, there's, at least for me, there's that little gut check of like, and AI did a fantastic job. I'm so discouraged. Now, how do I protect myself against the AI? In the sense that if it makes mistakes during this process, would we know? So that's what I was, thinking back of like text to speech and then speech to text and then comparing the two to alert me of when there's differences.
Yeah.
Is there some way we could do that here such that, Marv or the other recipients can see if there's a hiccup?
Yeah, I think some view like this would be helpful to say, we imported the changes from BTT writer and this is what it was. And this, I mean, not this specifically, but something like this. Marv could look at and see, yeah, these were the changes. I think a big piece of this, I forget who suggested, it might have been John, suggested it would be great to have a UI where Marv and or the translation team could walk through the set of changes and say, yep. Oh, no, that one's no good, and so forth. Did you have a comment, Lang? I saw your.
That was just the one that I mentioned to you that we could do as part of audit format.
Yeah, well, maybe it was you, Lang. Thank you. It was a good suggestion.
Your word here would be awesome.
So I think that would be where I would want to go to answer that question of how do we QA what the AI is doing? I think something like this is probably, because this is what I use to figure out, did it do what I
Did it work?
Yeah.
Another piece of convoluted syntax would be like the original repo, the writer repo might have section headings in it, but they don't mark them. They just put something before the verse says all caps or something.
Oh,
We create this section heading marker, delineate that. You don't really want to replace the text. But it is an update. So just dealing with that kind of thing, you know.
I think the bite size that Craig got this time assumes that we have already taken care of that one way.
Right.
And so going forward, the original repo is going to have the section heading and whatnot, but it's included in.
Right, but we just don't have that step in practice.
It's not currently there.
yeah.
But that's great. This is very promising. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions and I think Joe does as well. Did you do this in just the interactive browser mode?
Mhm.
Okay. My first thought was probably bouncing it off the API like one verse at a time. So then you could actually use programming to do that. That would make you feel better.
Mhm.
But also if you did it in discrete pieces, it'd be easier to say like, this is the new one, merge it over here, and then like compare it back. Anyway, I think this is excellent. And I also think I'd be curious to see how the API does, because then you don't have to worry about context window. You're just gonna let it rip in the background, just let it kind of
Oh,
work.
I see. So you're saying instead of like feeding it, here's the book of Mark, like just say, no, we're gonna just do it as a section or a verse at a
Right.
time or whatever it is.
Write a process that'll just keep, send the next verse off to the API, get the merge thing back. you know, And then you can immediately compare, okay, I had this and I expected to have this. Now I can make sure that they're right or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. Good thinking.
Along with the print change.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So these are the places in the file that have changed.
Yeah, because quite possibly for many verses, there wouldn't be any changes because they generally change what Marv asked them to change at that point in the refinement process.
Right. Mhm.
Well, if you ran a diff against their original repo, you would know what you needed to pick up. You don't have to run the whole book through. If they made 20 changes in the book of Mark and you ran a diff against what they had originally uploaded to the new one.
It's not quite that simple. And the reason why is that when we go back, like, let's say I skipped over the step where we take Marv's repo and we refresh the BTT writer correct with Marv's changes so that we're all on the same page. That movement is lossy because BTT writer doesn't know about a bunch of markers. John assures me BTT writer will ignore them. That's probably true, but I'm afraid.
Don't be afraid.
And so it's the BTT writer text, even when it's been copied from the consolidated, isn't exactly the same. So I don't know if a diff would work, but it might.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's great.
So I had two things to add to the list of things to check. Number one, non-Roman scripts.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if this is synonymous, but certainly also a case of a right to left language.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad we're recording this. I'll pick those up.
They're cousins for sure.
Yeah.
Non-Roman and right to left. Yeah.
You can almost pull the text direction from like the metadata of the repos and then feed that into the LLM as well.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wonder if it would matter because from the point of view of an LLM, it's just reading byte after byte after byte, token after token after token. So I'm not sure because right to left or left to right is a rendering issue, but I'm not sure if it's a parsing issue.
It's not, but the problem is your statistics of the association of what follows this token is all going to be messed up.
Yeah.
So like your natural inclination is correct if you're writing a parser like with deterministic software, but that's not necessarily how the LLM is interpreting it. So it's just a thing we'd want to test. Like, yeah, I would assume some of it is similar to why we see pretty good performance on HDR with languages that we know it doesn't understand, because it is at least very familiar with Latin characters. So I am just curious what happens when you move to a character set that it is much less familiar with.
Yeah, yeah, those are all great suggestions. Yep, thank you for that. Oh, and I need to, if I didn't already, I need to give Joe credit because when we were first talking about this, I was going to focus on the consolidation of the syntax update side. And Joe said that it would probably be more profitable to see if the content update side was possible.
Yeah.
So Joe kind of changed the tracks my train was on. I'm really glad you did. That was a great idea, Joe. Thank you for doing that.
That is good, because like for Larry and his team, that is a real pain point. Like, we need to redo our consolidated and there have been changes on the field, and man, that's cumbersome.
Yeah.
Either bring them in one by one manually or redo all the work from the get-go.
Craig, great job. Super excited.